Welcome back to Surviving Paradise. I can't believe we're in our third episode already. And as you know, with each and every one of these, it's going to be very organic. It's going to be me spewing experience, spewing knowledge, and just really unpacking subjects that might be on my mind. They might be timely. As you know, our last episode, we talked about Partaker Watch, the memorial, as memorial season has just ended for Jehovah's Witnesses. But in this episode, I wanted to talk a little bit about something that I feel like has absolute far reaching, really negative impact on Jehovah's Witnesses and those that grow up around the quote unquote religion. But before we get started, I want to send a thank you out, a big time thank you to everyone. The response to this has been overwhelming to me. I'm flattered. I'm thankful. This is something that after leaving Jehovah's Witnesses 13 years ago or so in 2009, I never, ever thought I'd be doing this. Not because I was afraid to, or not because in some ways I didn't want to. It was just not something that I saw in my future. I talked about it in an earlier episode that in many ways, excuse me, that's organic, clearing the throat. In many, many ways, I really liken people who keep going back after this as the guy who stands in someone's driveway and screams at them because they believe in Santa Claus. Look, if you want to believe in Santa Claus, that's your business. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not hurting anyone. But in terms of Jehovah's Witnesses, as you know, what drove me to do this was it is hurting people. It's hurting them dramatically. And the response I've had from those that have listened, my DMs on Instagram, I just tonight I learned someone reached out to me and connected to me, and you know who you are. Thank you, that I had not thought about or talked to in many years in a completely different country. It's absolutely fantastic to reconnect with people. And I think that that's part of what drives this show and the reason why I do it. So, in many ways, I really just wanted to reach out before we get started on this fun filled episode and say thank you to those that have tuned in early to this. And let's keep doing it. We're going to have a lot of fun. I'm going to share some personal stories, my own opinions and insights. It's going to be so raw and organic. There's nothing polished about this. And I think it's important for all of us that have survived the spiritual paradise that is Jehovah's Witnesses. So big time thanks. I'll probably do that a lot as we get started with this thing and this project. But this week, I wanted to talk about something that I think has always intrigued me about Jehovah's Witnesses, despite the fact that I actually became one, and that is elders. Jehovah's Witness elders, congregation elders, whatever title you want to put to it. This has always been just an insane and crazy subject that I feel ultimately, due to some of the criminal activity and the devastating emotions and the brainwashing, putting a bunch of uneducated, in many cases, power-hungry turds in a position where they can influence, and impact another person's life has always been really troubling to me. And this goes back to when I was a kid. So we're going to unpack this thing called elders, discuss the God magic that is Holy Spirit that they claim appoints elders. I'm going to say it's more like the Force in Star Wars, only I'm going to change it to Obi-Wan baloney because there is no truth to it. But let's unpack this thing. So going back for me, the elder arrangement and the whole concept of elders started at a really young age. I grew up in the 70s in the Bay Area, Marin County, went to a congregation called the Green Beret Congregation out there just north of San Rafael near Terra Linda. And that was my first exposure really to the elder arrangement. I could technically go back farther to when I was in LA as an even younger kid, the Los Angeles area, the Valinda congregation. But those memories are a lot less lucid, I guess is the best word. A lot less lucid. I do remember a couple of the elders coming by the house and making shepherding calls on my mom and us three kids and a very close roommate that lived with us and became a family friend. Nonetheless, I'm going to start in the Bay Area because that's where it really started. That's where my mind started spinning on elders and the elder arrangement. And you can imagine that all of this followed me through my time as a Jehovah's Witness elder. I became an elder, as I mentioned, at a very young age, at 27. I was the youngest elder, to my knowledge, in the circuit. I served for over 11 years. I served at the circuit level, the district level. I did the baptism talk. I served on so many judicial committees, I can't even remember them. And then the big moment, I guess, was when I was chosen by Brooklyn Bethel, yes, Brooklyn at that time, to actually teach at Kingdom Ministry School. And one of the segments that I taught was on child abuse and child molestation, which was a brain bender, heartbreaker, no words around that. But let's go back. So I go back to the 70s. I was in this congregation. I have nothing but amazing memories as a kid growing up in those congregations in Northern California. But it was during this time that major league scandal hit the congregation, and I was just old enough to understand it. A couple of the very popular elders, I remember both of these guys, big dudes, big physically stature, big dudes. They had families, their kids. One of their kids, one of them, excuse me, had two boys that I ran around with as a kid in the congregation. The other one did not have kids at that time, but he was the presiding overseer. So if you're new to Jehovah's Witnesses or just curious, during this period of time, 70s, 80s, 90s, even 2000s, they had titles for different positions that rotated from time to time in the congregation and the elder arrangement. Presiding overseer was, for lack of a better term, he was the chairman. He was the guy that ran the show, so to speak. Well, at this time, as it turns out in the 70s, what hit this kid hard was the presiding overseer and one of the other guys, the father of the two boys that I hung around with. We had a lot of kids in the hall. It was great. They got involved in some wife swapping, you know, just one of those things you do in the 70s. It was insane. And even as a kid, all of us as kids growing up in the congregation, the presiding overseer and another elder, there was a ministerial servant involved, all of this, it really began to make me question why it is that we respect these guys, what made them special, how it was, and that's going to be the focus of this episode. How is it that when you look back on an incident like that, which by the way, wiped out half that congregation in the late 70s, wiped it out, including this kid, who I still think, had we not moved to the Portland, Oregon area, probably never would have been a Jehovah's Witness because of partly this experience and also just wanting to be a normal kid. But I digress. It was during this time that the whole idea that Jehovah's Witness elders are chosen by Holy Spirit was called into question. You can imagine that this thing sat in the back of my skull and my head until I myself was appointed to be a congregation elder much later in life in the late 90s. So going back to that, kind of setting the stage for this entire thing, Jehovah's Witness elders, as Jehovah's Witnesses themselves will tell you, are chosen by Holy Spirit. They're chosen by Jehovah and his son Jesus, particularly Jesus, personally. And if they tell you that they don't believe that, just know that it is a complete lie. It is in print. Let me give you some examples of how Jehovah's Witness elders, no matter who they might be, are handpicked by the Holy Spirit, directed through the governing body and the Bible. Here are some direct references for you when they tell you, well, yes, because this has been called into question not only by a kid in the 70s when there's wife swapping scandals, but even more recently as we learn that men in positions of authority, congregation elders, have been harming, molesting, and abusing children for decades. Keep this in mind when you consider that Jesus, according to them, has hand chosen them. Some quotes for you. From the Watchtower 2011, December 15th, page 25. Quote, elders, for instance, are appointed by Holy Spirit, but not all Spirit-anointed ones serve as overseers in the congregation. What are we to conclude from this? Simply that God's Spirit operates in different ways on members of the congregation. That's right. From the word go, folks, Jehovah's Witness elders are elite. Watchtower of 2011, December 15th, page 25. Here's another good one, and you'll note that most of these references are within the last 10 to 15 years. Watchtower 2014, November 15th, page 28. Quote, first, Holy Spirit moved the Bible writers to record the qualifications for elders and ministerial servants. Second, those recommending and making such appointments specifically pray for Jehovah's Spirit to direct them as they review whether a brother meets the scriptural requirements to a reasonable degree. Third, the individual being recommended needs to display the fruitage of God's Holy Spirit in his own life. So, God's Spirit is involved in all aspects of the appointment process. End quote. Watchtower, 2014, November 15th, page 28. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that when a man, and you'll note that women are not allowed, God forbid, an incredibly compassionate, empathetic, and intelligent woman ever have the opportunity to lead a group of people with spiritual needs. Nope, not allowed. So this is just men. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that any and all men that take that stage as a congregation elder have been chosen by means of Holy Spirit, or like I like to call it, God magic, or like Star Wars like to call it, the Force. Obi-Wan Baloney bestows his hands upon you, and you are instantly filled with this magic force, and you're more special than anyone else in the congregation. You, sir, have been chosen to lead us. If you sense the sarcasm, it's good. Because there is nothing about this that even remotely is accurate. Let's talk a little bit about the Holy Spirit for a minute. A couple of references. The Holy Spirit, and we could do an entire episode on Holy Spirit. We're not going to get into that. As stated, as we kind of feel our way through setting up episodes and interviews and folks, we're going to try to stay away from doing entire podcast episodes on doctrine. I think there's people out there in the ex-Jehovah's Witness community that are great at doing that. Some of them recently under fire, as I've learned, but there's a lot of well-studied people. We're going to reference some of it, but we're not going to go too deep. So just on the Holy Spirit briefly, just know, Reasoning from the Scriptures, 1985, page 406 to 407, the Holy Spirit is a force, not alive, but a force. From the Watchtower, June 1st, 1952, page 24, the Holy Spirit is God's impersonal active force. Okay. The connection between the force in both references and Obi-Wan Kenobi or Star Wars isn't lost on this kid who grew up in the late 70s. So keep this in mind now as you consider the fact that these elders who are put in positions of life and death matters are said to be handpicked by Jehovah God, Jesus Christ, and the Force. May the Force be with you. Okay. If you're in any doubt or you're wondering what it means in terms of status in a Jehovah's Witness congregation, in being an elder or the title of elder, let's wipe that out right now. Jehovah's Witnesses openly teach that elders, according to Isaiah 32, 1 through 3, are princes in the earth. That's right. They're spiritual royalty right here on earth. They are going to move into the new system of things with positions of leadership, or should I say responsibilities of leadership. They're going to join such luminaries, such high status characters as Moses, David, Solomon, Ezekiel, Isaiah. The list goes on and on. The list goes on and on. Jonah, Abraham, Isaac, all of them, princes. They don't have to be appointed by Holy Spirit. Apparently, they already have been. Subject for another episode. But elders are considered princes, according to Jehovah's Witnesses, and this is absolutely littered throughout the literature. Watchtowers, awakes, you name it. To take it a step further, elders are considered to be stars in the right hand of Jesus Christ himself. Keep in mind, he's handpicked them. He's handpicked these guys, these men in every congregation anywhere on earth. They're considered to be in his right hand, according to Revelation 1:16. The Watchtower, and I quote, the seven stars, anointed elders, and by extension, all elders are in Jesus' right hand. The stars are under Jesus' full control, power, and direction. If somebody on the body of elders needs correction, Jesus will see to it that this is done in his own time and way. Let me reread that. The stars, or elders, are under Jesus' full control, power, and direction. So why do I bring all of this up? Because in order to understand Jehovah's Witness elders, you need to understand in what high esteem they're held in the congregation arrangement, why so many men, so many boys grow up wanting to be a Jehovah's Witness elder, and why it's so incredibly important to them. This is as close as it gets for any kid that's a Jehovah's Witness to being Prince Charming, to being Luke Skywalker, to being any hero that they've grown up wanting to be. Because Jehovah and Jesus handpick you. You're a prince. You're in Jesus' right hand. Jesus under full control and power and direction of the Son of God. Why am I so sarcastic about this? Are Jehovah's Witnesses truly appointed by some God magic, by Holy Spirit, by the Force? Let me assure you that nothing, and I mean nothing, could be further from the truth. It couldn't be further from the truth. And the most ridiculous part of this entire idea that Jehovah's Witness elders are chosen by God and his Son personally literally lives in their own literature. It literally lives within common sense. None of this is accurate. None of this is remotely taught in the Bible. The entire elder arrangement of Jehovah's Witnesses came into effect in roughly 1870, if you want to call it the elder arrangement. It was deacons or leaders in the congregation from 1870 down to 1932. And this can be found in the yearbook of 1975, page 164. Men were voted. The elders and deacons were elected congregationally each year by a showing of hands. Yearbook, 1975, page 164. No mention of the Holy Spirit there. No mention of the Holy Spirit there. No mention of the Force. No, not there. They were literally voted. So, again, why am I bringing this up? Just, I'm all over the board on this, folks. This one gets me fired up. Because the idea that any man, any one of these men, and I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, you've had encounters with elders, whether it was something as innocent as a congregation, a day in field service, or it ramped up into a shepherding call or a judicial committee, or it guts me to think that you listen to one of these men if it was a life and death circumstance, which, by the way, I would consider shunning and disfellowshipping a life and death circumstance, because it's a death of a relationship. It's a death of a family. So to even think that these men are somehow under the full control of Jesus, of Jehovah, of the Force, of God magic, or the Holy Spirit. And folks, I want to say at this point, I'm not trying to offend anyone that may be a Christian listening or who may believe in Holy Spirit. I do not. So again, I'm being raw and organic. I've also lived this, as we will soon learn. I can tell you that anyone who puts their trust in such things is making a massive, massive mistake. Some of the most unintelligent, uneducated, socially awkward, ill-equipped people I've ever met in my life in any walk of life were Jehovah's Witness elders. And I could tell story after story, which I may just get into here in a minute, to back that up. I think for just a quick minute, I've talked about what the stage or what the foundation is for this title among Jehovah's Witnesses. But I want to go back, if you're someone listening and you're just not acquainted with it, and talk about how they think Holy Spirit is involved. As we've already seen, they think it's Jehovah, they think it's Jesus. They also think it comes from the pages of the Bible, as if it magically can identify a man of high character, simply because of this. There are several places in the Bible, particularly in the Greek, all of the Greek scriptures, that identify what a high quality man who may be placed in a position of leadership. No mention of the word elder or congregation elder or Jehovah's Witness elder or circuit overseer or district overseer. Those are all man made things. Those are man made archetypes that they pulled from here. The Bible at 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 10, talks about what it means to be an overseer. And of course, that too is according to the New World Translation, overseer. What a positive word. This statement is trustworthy. If a man is reaching out to be an overseer, he is desirous of a fine work. The overseer should therefore be irreprehensible. That's going to cause some problems. A husband of one wife, moderate in habits, sound in mind, orderly, hospitable, qualified to teach, not a drunkard, not violent, but reasonable, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money, a man presiding over his own household in a fine manner, having his children in subjection with all seriousness. Oh boy. For if any man does not know how to preside over his own household, how will he care for the congregation of God? Not a newly converted man, for fear that he might get puffed up with pride and fall into the judgment passed on to the devil. Moreover, and I always thought this one was a doozy, he should also have a fine testimony from outsiders, so that he does not fall into reproach and a snare of the devil. And just in case you were curious, same stuff applies to ministerial servants. Words added in the New World Translation, not found elsewhere. Ministerial servants in verse 8 should likewise be serious, not double-tongued, not indulging in a lot of wine, not greedy of dishonest gain, holding the sacred secret of the faith with a clean conscience. Also, let these be tested as to fitness first. Yes, they're now appointing these men in their early 20s, folks. Then let them serve as ministers as they are free from accusation. So, I realize I'm all over the board. I could have come out this much more organized, but I think you're getting a general snapshot of where this idea that a Jehovah's Witness congregation elder is held in very high esteem, how they truly believe the Holy Spirit is involved, but with Jehovah and Jesus hand picking them. You heard it here. You heard it from their own literature where they believe this. And then, of course, they love to quote those set of verses in 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 10, as a snapshot of what a congregation elder should look like. Here's the problem with all of it. There's several problems. None of this stuff, none of the details of this arrangement, none of these things are mapped out in the Bible outside of what I just read, which is just men you could lean on in terms of leadership. There's no mention of titles. There's no mention of ages. There's no mention of you have to be a ministerial servant first. You have to be a baptized Jehovah's Witness first. None of those things are mentioned. They've all been added by men. There is some very, very troubling things in 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 10 that I think any man who served as an elder among Jehovah's Witnesses somewhat puts their head down on the desk and starts pounding. I have served as an elder for 11 years. It's been some time now. Granted, the arrangement has changed in that they no longer rotate positions. Of course, God knows how Jehovah and Jesus got that wrong. They've made some refinements over the years, including not voting by hand after 1932. Might I mention, after 1932, all appointments came from the governing body out of New York, Brooklyn, Bethel, and now, of course, Wallkill and beyond. It went from people being voted on in their hometown congregation to none of these guys can be appointed by Holy Spirit unless we say so in New York. Further proof that the entire thing is a complete sham. But here's the thing. If you did take the Bible seriously and you were someone who became an elder, as I did at the tender age of 27, you take this stuff seriously, at least if you have the right heart condition. And I think there's a big argument that some men who do not have the right heart condition. They're power hungry. They love to lord it over the people in the congregation. They love to be seen as important. For me, if I'm being straight, candid, and honest and raw, being a congregation elder really helped fill a void for me as a fatherless boy. It most definitely did feed my ego, as painful as it is for me to say that. Not because I just loved being seen as important, but I loved to be valued. And I really did enjoy helping people. Nonetheless, when you look at 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 10, and you start to break down what's described here, again, minus all the Jehovah's Witness man-made crap that came out after 1932, none of these things apply across the board to any man I ever served with as an elder. If I went back and described my congregation just outside of Portland in the 90s, 2000s as an elder, we were, as I've mentioned in past podcasts, we were that hip, fun congregation. We had a younger elder's body on average. We had men that were realistic. Almost all of them had teenagers, a lot of them teenage daughters, by no strange coincidence. And I can tell you that if you were to put this description up against any of the men I served with, absolutely none of us should have been congregation elders. Absolutely all of us should have been looking to the skies and at Jehovah and Jesus and said, "Hey, are you guys sure? Are you sure about this?" Now, I'm not going to lie, like anything in life, you've got people who have higher character and did a better job than others. You had men that studied, that cared, that literally from the heart prepared for their position as an elder. And then you got a whole bunch that didn't, like at all. And some of it was age. They were up there in age, 70s, 80s, even in their 90s. Some of it were you had to really question how they ever got appointed to be in a leadership position for the types of things a congregation elder of Jehovah's Witnesses has to handle. Look at those descriptors. He has to be irreprehensible. Huh? No one's going to be irreprehensible. Okay, let's say we take it with a grain of salt. A husband of one wife. Okay, yeah, it seems pretty good. Moderate in habits. All right, sound in mind, folks. Some of the most depressed people I've ever been around as a Jehovah's Witness were fellow congregation elders. And I have stated, whether it fits right here or not, that probably one of the best things that could ever happen to a Jehovah's Witness male is he becomes an elder. Because at that point, the curtain is opened to this entire organization. If you are a congregation elder and you rip back that curtain once you're in the star chamber, or otherwise known as the B school, and you don't have serious questions, you never should have been in that position to begin with. You clearly don't have the makeup, the personality, the heart condition. God, I can't believe I just said that. To be a congregation elder. You don't. Because once that curtain is tore back, you're either in absolute shock or you just get on board, baby. You just get on board and you enjoy the power. So, being sound in mind, I've rarely seen that. And I've seen some real turds that were Jehovah's Witness elders. Guys that never should have been in that position, never would have been in any other institutional role in their life. No way, no how. It goes on to call them orderly, hospitable. Okay, we can talk about that all day. This one's a doozy. Qualified to teach. I can't even begin to tell you how horrific it was as a Jehovah's Witness teenage guy or ministerial servant or unbaptized publisher, whatever stupid title they made up that you want to put up, which is very culty. If you can't see the titles are culty and loaded language like anointed, the truth, brothers, sisters, that's cultish language, folks. But nothing was more horrifying than watching an incredibly intelligent, loyal, kind woman take out a napkin, pop it on her head because she had a boy or a man in her presence. She wasn't qualified to teach because she was born with the wrong physical parts and she has more estrogen. Yeah, you can tell it pisses me off. It's one of the worst things I've ever seen, and I experienced it. But then to become a congregation elder and see these men who many thought fell in and were handpicked by Jesus himself because they were qualified to teach, and they never even read the Bible, was so incredibly absurd that you could sense it still pisses me off. And yet you had this amazing woman who was not qualified to teach, could never be an elder. I mean, could go down a rabbit hole here, but you get the idea. The next one's even better. Not a drunkard. People, as controversial as it is, I promised raw, I promised honest, I promised ripping down the curtain, even on my own mistakes in this podcast. Let me tell you something. I would say on every elder body I served on, it was 50-50. 50 weren't drinkers or drank very moderately. The other 50% were alcoholics. They had a problem with alcohol. Oftentimes drunks, functioning drunks. Even at congregation get-togethers, the old book study barbecue. Brother Jones over there looks like he's got his buzz on pretty good. I can't even begin to tell you the problem with alcohol and congregation elders. I am on the West Coast of the United States, and I can tell you that it is a massive problem to this day. Alcohol and Jehovah's Witnesses, massive problem. Subject for a show all unto itself. Probably have some guests on for that one because it is probably, in my mind, one of the number one problems in the entire organization that goes to, of course, just a couple of commas earlier, sound in mind. They're so depressed, so stressed out and overworked that oftentimes they overdrink all the time. And without picking on gender roles, the amount of congregation elders whose wives are alcoholics, one glass of wine, one bottle of wine, 2 bottles of wine at the baby shower, after the book study on a Saturday, at the congregation picnic, is staggering. Staggering. 1 Timothy 3 goes on to say, not violent, but reasonable, not quarrelsome. Oh, God. The fights in elders' meetings are some of the best you'll ever watch. Grown men fighting over God magic, the force, whether or not they're right or the other guy's right. Coming to meetings with bound volumes from the 50s, 60s, and 70s to argue their point. That was the educated group, not the other 50% who've never read the Bible. Goes on to say, not a lover of money. Subject for another time. A man presiding over his own household in a fine manner, having his children in subjection with all seriousness. Right there and then between the drinking and this verse, verse 4, the game is over, gig is up. Every congregation I was in, before I was an elder, when I was an elder, or went to after I was removed as an elder, had massive problems with the kids of elders, particularly teenagers that were absolutely living double, triple, and quadruple lives and doing all sorts of things that their fathers didn't know about. I've been very open about the fact that my time as an elder was mostly spent taking care of my fellow elders' kids, for the most part, daughters, because they all had teenage girls who I love immensely. Some of them have grown to be amazing women, have their own families now. Some are witnesses, most are not, oddly enough. Shocker. But I spent countless hours in time being there for the teenage people, teenage kids, people. They are people. Particularly the teenage girls who had all kinds of troubles, whether it was dating, dealing with their parents, their father's hypocrisy, on and on and on it goes. So we could continue in 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 10, but I think you get the point. The idea, if you're sitting out there and you're a PMO or you're a PME, and you think that those men, I don't care if it's 2 or 5 or 10 in your congregation, are somehow hand chosen by Jesus Christ himself by means of Holy Spirit, I can assure you, that is not the case. There is no Holy Spirit. Aside from what I witnessed and I experienced as a congregation elder for 11 years, a ministerial servant for 5, I can tell you that there's nothing special that goes into the appointment of an elder. In fact, it is quite the opposite. I mentioned that the yearbook of 1975 said that in 1870 to 1932, it was a hand vote. Hey, Brother Jones over there, you like him? I like him. Hands up. He's an elder now. Suddenly in 1932, it was by means of Jesus. Times changed, and Jesus, through at that time Judge Rutherford and the governing body, which, by the way, didn't yet exist, subject for another episode, they were going to make the call on whether someone qualified. Let me tell you what it looks like to appoint an elder or a ministerial servant when you are an elder on the elder's body. I am now going to rip back the curtain on what an elders meeting looks like just prior to the circuit overseer visit, because as you know, Jehovah's Witness elders go into the B school or the C school. They all sit down. They got to come up with some men that they want to appoint to positions of service. And then they run it by the circuit overseer, who then, well, we'll get into that. He then sends it to New York, who either does the thumbs up or thumbs down. Picture the scene in Gladiator with with Maximus. Thumbs up, thumbs down, folks. Is this guy good enough or not? Jesus is telling us. He's whispering in our ear by means of the Force. Let me rip back the curtain and tell you exactly what happens. First and foremost, it's all politics. All of it. There is all kinds of justification, positioning, repositioning between what may be one elder and several elders, or several elders versus the other elder on a brother that they think should be an elder or a ministerial servant. It's politics. Let me tell you what those politics include. The number one thing, and I mean it, I did it for 11 years, folks. I'm here to tell you I was part of the body that appointed men, appointed elders. Now, not thinking again, they always do the old read 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 10. It's always read. It's almost like putting your socks on in the morning. Well, we got to read. Let's read it. Yeah, I mean, the Holy Spirit's in the room, the magic. But it quickly, and I mean quickly, goes from 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 10 into the real factors on what it means to be a Jehovah's Witness elder. And why do I bring this up? Because these men are put in positions that are life and death. If you're in an accident and need blood, if you have a child who's been harmed or molested, if you yourself are in some life and death situation, if your marriage is about to implode, these are the cats that you call, because they have been handpicked by Jesus to give you this advice. Okay, I digress. Back to what it is. It's politics. The number one thing after you read 1 Timothy 3, and I've seen it where even that wasn't done, the first thing they do, at least during my time as an elder, and it is, I'm not even sure if it has changed a little bit, but it can't be much, I can assure you, is they whip out the publisher card box, that is. They then pull a guy's publisher card and they start looking back over the last at least 6 months, usually 12 months. The real hardcore bodies of elders will look back 2 years to see what his field service average was and if it met the national average, which for most of the 90s and 2000s hovered around 10 hours a month per publisher. So if this guy was going out in service for 10 hours and averaging 10 hours a month, he suddenly was in the running to be a congregation elder deciding life and death matters. Did he go out in field service, knock on mostly empty doors for an hour and a half on Saturdays, then bust a move to his local Starbucks where he sat around for 30 minutes, then followed it up with a return visit on his way back to the Kingdom Hall to dump the car group? If he was doing that for upwards of 10 hours a month, he was a spiritual man handpicked by Jesus himself by means of the Holy Spirit, the God magic, the Force, to now make life or death decisions. I'm telling you, that is the number one thing that was considered. Circuit overseers would listen to you say, he's a nice man. He's a good man. Guess what? He's married to one woman. That's good. He hasn't done anything awful. He hasn't been arrested. The circuit overseer would then look at the elders and go, what's his field service average? And out came the publisher card out of the box for whoever felt or who was promoting this brother to be an elder, the next guy in the room, so to speak. The second thing that comes into play almost every time, and I do mean every time, is he well liked? Is he popular? Do people like him? Is he a good dude? And then the third thing, is he a decent speaker? When he gets on stage, are people moved by his talks, or do they at least listen to him? They do not run from the kingdom hall screaming. By the way, we missed the ball on that a lot. I'm sure all of us have sat through some absolutely brutal, brutal talks by congregation elders. And considering they run the show, from public talks to special talks to the memorial to all, we probably all of us would like back several months and years of our lives in some of the worst talks you've ever heard in your life. Nonetheless, those are your three factors, folks. In my 11 years, I went back before hitting record on this podcast and was trying to think how many men I had a hand in appointing to Jehovah's Witness elder. I think it was upwards of 10, if I'm counting the names right, those of which I will not share. But I can tell you that in every case, and this is universally true, this was not unique to our congregation in Oregon, universally true, the process is, I'd like to nominate so-and-so. Cool. Let's read 1 Timothy 3. Cool. Get out his publisher cards. How many hours in field service is he doing? Oh, 10? Cool. Do people like him? Is he pretty good on stage? Yeah, he's okay. Cool. Congratulations, brother so-and-so. The magic, the God magic, the spirit, the force has told us that you should be a congregation elder. So there you have it, folks. This was on my mind today. I recently learned of someone that was appointed to ministerial servant that just a short time ago was absolutely living a double or triple life, from smoking to drinking to all sorts of stuff, and recently learned that that person is now appointed as a servant in the congregation. And it just goes to show that the entire idea that Jehovah and his son, by means of Holy Spirit, are appointing these men couldn't be further from the truth. And to highlight what a tragedy and how sickening this entire process is, these men have been put in positions where many people, many publishers, men and women and children have listened to the things they've said, taken them to heart as a message from Jehovah himself, and made decisions that have deeply, deeply harmed and altered their lives. Make no mistake, in some cases it has cost people their lives because they believe this arrangement, this elder arrangement, was put into effect by God himself and his son, his all-powerful son. He handpicked brother so-and-so. Well, he was kind of bombed at the congregation. Don't let that, doesn't matter. Jesus picked him. Jesus picked him. So whatever advice comes out of his mouth next, you should take to heart and you should consider. If it's your child's life, what does the elders say? If they need blood, the Jehovah's Witness organization sends the hospital liaison committee, the blood visitation group, who literally are giving you advice on what to do with your child. All of these guys picked on some complete bullshit fabrication that Jesus has chosen them by hand, by means of his Holy Spirit. I can't tell you how absurd it is. I can't tell you, despite being out of that organization for 13 years now, how much it angers me. After I was removed as an elder, as I went into in a past episode due to my marriage, I can tell you I had elders calling me wanting my advice. You got to remember, I've been removed by those same elders, and they're calling me to conduct the book study, which is now defunct. They're calling me to literally step in and conduct the watchtower. that I did for 8 years. They were calling me to ask for advice on what to do with their marriages and their kids. Now, do I say that to brag? Please no, I don't. Please know that that's farthest from the truth. Why I do share it is because what are dudes that are appointed by Holy Spirit, by Jesus himself doing, asking for the advice of a guy that Jesus and the Holy Spirit apparently said shouldn't do this anymore? Why are they doing that? I'll tell you why. Because it's all bullshit. None of it's true. It's a lie. And it damages and impacts people's lives in a horrific way. In the future, I'm going to go into episodes just telling stories of what goes on at an elders meeting, because some of it is some of the most staggering, ridiculous. Some of it is so funny. Some of it is so tragic and painful. But doesn't that describe just a bunch of guys getting together, talking about serious and not so serious things? Yeah, it does. So the next time you see those guys with their bookcases head for the B school to come up with some incredible wisdom, say a prayer, and expect God magic or the Holy Spirit to give them answers to all of their problems and all of your problems, please know that it couldn't be further from the truth. Take it from an ex-elder, one who cared, one who bought into the lie, one who felt a huge responsibility to own up to the choice of him being an elder, who probably did damage to his own friendships, his own marriages, working overtime to live up to that title. Please know that it couldn't be further from the truth. Jehovah's Witness elders are not chosen by some magic spirit. They're not chosen by the force. They're not chosen by Jesus or by Jehovah himself or by a Jedi master, unless his name is Obi-Wan Baloney. Because all of it is BS. It couldn't be further from the truth. And if you're someone who is a Jehovah's Witness and you're doubting any of this and you're having the courage to listen to this, please just look into your own literature. Might I recommend you start with the Yearbook of 1975, page 164. There are several references in from 2005 up through 2014 regarding the elder arrangement and its changes, which should, for a logical person, raise some questions as to why Jesus is making so many changes in this magical arrangement of congregation elders. I can assure you, folks, that while I get fired up and I'm sarcastic about this one, there's a reason for it. I've seen the impact it has on people's lives. And might I add, not just on the people that obey Jehovah's Witness elders, but on people that are married to them, their kids, knowing that dad is up there on stage saying one thing, he goes home, it's a completely different gig. I dealt with all of these guys' kids, and I can tell you that one of the biggest problems most of them had was hypocrisy, because we're just all imperfect guys. So were they. Some of them had real serious issues that should have been dealt with and handled. So I think that's where I'll stop, as I'm running out of steam on this. And just say that, please, if you're listening to a man, flesh and blood man, I don't care what his title is, just know that he was not put there by some magical Holy Spirit or by Jesus himself. He was put there strictly on politics, on a popularity vote, on a show of hands, despite what they say. And I've literally seen that with my own eyes. Please, please, please don't trust the vast majority of Jehovah's Witness elders. And certainly don't take advice from men that are no more qualified to speak on subjects of health, mental health, marriage, gender issues, sexuality, any of those things. Most of them are not remotely qualified to lead you anywhere. Thanks for joining me on this episode. I appreciate all the kind messages in private. I'm just being real. I'll hope that you'll stick around, like, subscribe, as we tackle some of the more tough subjects. I am lining up some guests to bounce off some really entertaining stories and experiences. And I hope at the bottom of my heart, I hope from the bottom of my heart, that if anything you heard tonight helps you, it gives you some things to think about, and it can free you from the quote unquote spiritual paradise of Jehovah's Witnesses. Thanks for joining me this week. Look forward to connecting with you next week, and keep that feedback coming. I certainly appreciate it. Thank you for joining Surviving Paradise.